Mark, and good. Thank you for joining the class. I know you're here to do presentations. I started with the last class talking about my real goal here is to try to find talent who wants to work somewhere in the creative tech economy. So I'm going to ask this question. Is there anybody who does not want to work in the creative tech economy here in Southern California? Okay, all right. Then we're in the right class.
I said I was considering changing mine to be a forest ranger.
Yeah, my purpose, my why for being here is to try and find people who are interested in learning how to be a production or an executive or any type of an assistant to a company, a commercial company who's doing business in media, television, film, basically all forms of digital media publications. And so my goal really is to see if I can find a way to get you guys better prepared for submitting yourself for qualification to be an assistant at Heartbeat Studios. Heartbeat Studios is two sound stages, about 40,000 square feet of production capability in Canoga Park. We're having a grand opening of sorts tomorrow. Anne-Marie will be there. It's primarily for instructors, administrators who are going to figure out how to use this facility and our curriculum to help you get prepared for being potentially working for us. And if we can't hire you, we'll try to find somewhere else to hire you to go through our course. But the real goal is to see if we can find people who have the kind of characteristics and integrity to be an assistant, which is really tough because none of you guys have gone through all the things you've gone through to be an assistant. But we believe that some of the most talented people are probably not the best fits for what we do. But if you are talented and you're a digital learner and you're willing to, again, be part of a team, we're looking to try to groom you guys for those opportunities. But I'm going to start now with telling a little bit about what I do and kind of how I got to be a talent scout and a talent aggregator. I'm a filmmaker. Primarily, I'm interested as a subject matter expert in African American military history. I've been involved with documentaries, some TV projects, commercial TV projects for research. So I'm going to play a couple of clips to give you guys some kind of context to what I'm talking about. Here's the first one.
Dakar is best known for his fantastic basketball skills, but what many might not know is since the age of 13, this basketball giant has also been a history buff.
Totally into history and what it means. It's so important because you don't really understand where you're going, you don't understand where you've been.
He says about 2:30 on the afternoon of the same day that Kilpatrick slipped her nose in a dock at the foot of Wall Street. While the regimental band stood on the forward deck and played "There's No Place Like Home, Sweet Home."
African-American historian Anthony Powell and community activist Kevin Clark have joined their collections with Jabbar and created a 2,000-piece exhibit dedicated to the Buffalo Soldiers. The exhibit is now displayed at the Schomburg Center in Harlem, New York.
What the exhibit does is put before them images that challenge the theory that is still being perpetuated today.
They believe that through the items they collected and researched, they have uncovered truths about the historic contributions the soldiers have made.
And 80% of the time that settlers were rescued from hostile Native Americans with Buffalo soldiers who came to their rescue, not John Wayne.
Through artifacts, documents, and uniforms, they hope to illustrate that story. Photographs which are displayed were taken by Powell's own grandfather, Sergeant Samuel Waller, who served 40 years in the U.S. Army as one of the original Buffalo soldiers.
I asked my grandfather one day, in all the righteousness of a 16-year-old, why did you join this racist country zone? And the old man looked at me and said, the Army gave me the only part of the American dream that the nation would let me share in. And a couple of decades later, I finally got it.
The group also hopes to educate more people about the Buffalo Soldiers through a new endeavor, the Buffalo Soldiers Education Foundation.
A place of tolerance and a place for discourse and understanding about a period of history that very few people know about.
The foundation is in the process of setting up institutions nationwide. Curtis Jackson, BET Nightly News.
Okay, can you get the lights again? Thank you. I want to share that with you because that's kind of my beginning as a researcher on the African American military timeline. And what really amazed me is that I didn't know anything before I started. But the fact was that most of the stuff that I learned, I thought was almost like buried, hidden from me. And all the things I learned, I went to San Jose State many moons ago, and I thought I knew a lot about American history. But I started to realize that these people's stories through the artifacts that I managed, diaries, uniforms, saddle swords, were all parts of stories that I really were passionate about, telling the stories authentically. So, why this? Well, that becomes part of what I want to share with you guys about how to find your why, your purpose. And I've made this almost my purpose for the last 25 years. So I'm going to keep showing you guys little clips of things that have, again, progressed my research about how I want to make sure that the stories that I find that I can tie together, sew together, are authentically portraying men and women who've been dead almost 107 years. But their stories are now, again, being brought to life. Before I share this with you, has anybody ever heard the term Buffalo Soldiers? Okay, I'm just going to ask a couple of people. What did you know about Buffalo Soldiers before this?
Barley?
Okay, what about you, sir? Right there. Anybody else care to share what they knew about Buffalo Soldiers? Yeah, interestingly enough, there's a really good music video with the song. And you know, Bob Marley, again, not here to explain why. He connected these men to a great song. But again, they're a large part of, there's a lot of mythology and folklore about these gentlemen. And, you know, again, because of my interest in making sure that their whys became something that you guys could understand, I wanted to make sure that you could connect to them through my work. So I want to show you a little bit more about how you guys can find in your why how to connect to content that can become part of your purpose and maybe some part of your legacy. So I'm going to show you something else. Can you get the lights again, please?
Flying all around me. For love of liberty, the story of America's black patriots.
We were fighting for the flag and for our rights.
A historic 4-hour, 2-part documentary film broadcast on public television.
This is not the history of folks of color, it's the history of America.
Hosted by Halle Berry.
For love of liberty.
With an introduction by Colin Powell.
It is a wonderful story.
Narrated by Avery Brooks.
One of the first American heroes of World War II was black.
I had to read 50 books to get what he has put in a 4-hour video.
Men of color to arms.
Unprecedented and critically acclaimed.
The film was amazing.
I think it's a very important piece of work.
It's overwhelming. Our colored soldiers were in it to the end. They fought like heroes and died like martyrs.
And our young people need to know what their fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers did.
The series draws on letters,
Dear Mom and Pop, I can hardly remember what it's like in the States.
diaries,
Corporal Clinton Breeze fought like a cornered lion.
speeches,
This 4th of July is yours, not mine.
journalistic accounts,
I am not a Negro lover. My father fought with Mosby's Rangers and I was born in the South, but the Negroes saved that fight.
and historical text to acknowledge the sacrifices and accomplishments of African American servicemen and women whose stories are brought to life by America's greatest voices.
I did not volunteer to come here to be called a brave kid. The red tail would roll that wing over and over. We were exposed to a murderous fire from the battery at the fort.
The Negro is not equal to the white man.
We were the ambitious, the patriotic. patriotic, be adventurous.
I used to ask myself, why the hell should these guys fight? Why?
We have a history that we need to be proud of. We need to cherish it and make sure the future generations actually know.
You won't read too much about what black soldiers did on D-Day. We were there.
This is something that needs to be incorporated in our education system.
Here, the Negroes stood in the full glare of the greatest searchlight, part and parcel of the grandest armies ever mustered upon this continent.
Now, for the first time, this remarkable film has been reformatted for scholastic use.
On the 17th of February, 1919, New York City knew no color line.
It's very important that we know our history, and I think that we all, wherever we come from, do better when we have a greater sense of self.
The story of America's black patriots is a paradox.
Why, despite enormous injustice, did these determined individuals fight so valiantly for freedoms they themselves did not enjoy?
Liberty is what I'm struggling for, and what pulse does not beat high at the very mention of the name?
The death of my boy distinctly makes a liar out of those who have said the Negro will not fight for our country. Those who have felt that the Negro is a second-class citizen must know in their hearts that this isn't so.
For love of liberty, the story of America's black patriots, an emotional saga of unrecognized heroism and relentless perseverance that defines the price of liberty. It is a story that is relevant to all Americans.
This simply is freedom. Freedom is a precious thing.
Hey, can you flip the light? Okay, thank you. All right, so as a researcher, I found myself being recruited by the last voice you heard of this film was Lou Gossett Jr. He recruited me to help raise money for this project, for Love of Liberty. I helped raise about $4 million from the Department of Defense to fund this project. And I had to hold back a lot of the research, a lot of the stuff on Buffalo Soldiers, a lot of the stuff I was really passionate about. But this project was so well put together on paper. They had 7 Academy Award winners that donated their voices, about another 40 actors who donated their voices. And the project was really so big that I had to sacrifice my own research and my own projects for. And so we won a Producers Guild Award, an NAACP Image Award in 2011 for this project. And since then, I've been waiting my turn patiently to try to get my film projects funded. And I'm finally at the point now where I think I've got somebody who's going to give me a yes on funding my film project. I'm going to show you a little excerpt from it called The Fallen 66. But I wanted to ask you guys, I wanted to see if there's any questions, first of all, about anything I've shown you. Had anybody, before I showed you this this documentary, ever heard of For Love of Liberty, or ever heard about it? Anybody? Okay, good. Well, public broadcasting is really where a lot of the stuff that I research, a lot of stuff I'm going to do is going to probably live. But a lot of it's going to live, a lot of it's going to live online, and little short form content where people can start to hopefully examine what it is that we're talking about and drive people back to what it really I have is, which is the largest collection of African American military memorabilia. So I manage a collection, or a museum curator of all this history. And some parts of it are stored in atmospheric conditions where all this stuff is almost 170 years of age, has been preserved for me to put back out as museum exhibits. So as a researcher, as a museum curator, and now as a documentarian, I want to continue teaching people how they can find, again, in their lives, how to make sure that anything that they want to produce as content can be preserved for future generations. Because everything that we're doing today in terms of storytelling could be historical. So my goal really is to try and see if you guys can actually follow along, because I'm going to show you this documentary, and I'm going to ask you guys for a little help as I develop this documentary. I'm also going to introduce some of the students I've been working with who are helping me in research and in pre-production get this project developed. Any questions? All right, well, we're just going to move along.
Things like that, because this is definitely something that could, if marketing will directly online, and if you got lucky and it caught and became a little bit viral, this is definitely something that could read lots of money through Kickstarter and things like that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I'm going to have you guys pass this along. This is my kind of my storyboard for the more commercial parts of it. This is a project called Victory by Valor. It's a story of African American military superstars, actually athletic superstars, who happen to also be in both worlds, playing on the battlefield as well as on the playing field of sports. And so this is a pictorial of all of these guys who you'll find in my Mount Rushmore. Joe Louis, Jackie Robinson, Willie Mays, Arthur Ashe, and Sugar Ray Robinson. These are the 5 guys that all have one thing in common. They were all athletes, but they were all U.S. Army servicemen. And there's a lot of people who served in the military as well as become actors, athletes, and all kinds of different peoples impacted. So there's a real thin line between being an impactful civic citizen and being somebody who's selfless to serve their country during different periods of war.
Media activity strives to be the #1 media community for America's defense conversation. The Defense Media Activity provides a wide variety of news, information, imagery, and entertainment products for active duty, National Guard and Reserve service members, DoD civilians, military retirees, and their families around the world. The array of brands within the Defense Media Activity includes many well-known names, like American Forces Network, the Defense Imagery Management Operations Center, Defense.gov, DoD News, and the editorially independent Stars and Stripes newspaper. The multimedia production teams of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps are also an integral part of the DMA family, providing vital news and information. We serve our audience using every available media platform, including broadcast television and radio, still and motion imagery, newspapers, and social media. The Defense Media Activity also instructs the next generation who will undertake this mission through the Defense Information School at Fort Meade, Maryland. The employees of the Defense Media Activity include service members, government civilians and contractors working in the fields of public affairs, broadcast and print journalism, photography, video production, social media, education, and training. All are dedicated to providing news, entertainment, imagery, and information to the DoD audience, wherever they serve. Dedicated, agile, relevant, trustworthy. DMA, the Defense Media Activity.
Okay, lights, please. Yeah, so this is well. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so this is the website for the Defense Media Activity. But the thing that's relevant here is that I actually taken a group of students to the Riverside installation, where a lot of the broadcasts and a lot of the things that are happening for content distribution are happening there. And quite surprisingly, everybody that works there is interested. They're all making over 6 figures. Yeah, and then a lot of the contractors that they hire are people, stringers, and do contract work for them, and they're pretty much from the Southern California area. So if you don't get that job at Universal or Sony, you might want to look at them as another place to exercise your creative capacity. Okay. But again, I've connected with them because they have funded film projects in the past and hopefully in the future. So it's a good resource for me to be able to continue my passion of telling stories that mean something to me. So if you want to write this down, you might want to check them out. It's the Defense Media Activity in school. All right, I did this little, this is a project that I did for the Department of Defense, just to, it's kind of like a little 2.5-minute promotional trailer, but it's kind of the timeline of the African American military experience in 2.5 minutes. So they commissioned me to do this. Thank you. So my next project that I've been working on this really for 15 years. I met George Lucas and we interviewed him. Don't have enough time to show you the interview, but George Lucas has pledged his support for our project. So when we get to the development stage, he should call us. Still have his telephone number. Project is really, again, it's more of a research project to try and find the families of the people who still survived, those people who were killed in action in World War II as Tuskegee Airmen pilots. So the project's called The Fallen 66. And it talks literally about, those people who are still alive. Most of the guys who are still alive served with those folks who are in their mid-90s now. But there's one guy out of 66 pilots who were killed in action behind enemy lines, who they found a crash site, and was able to extract some DNA from the crash site to connect to the DNA of a family member. And it took 7 years for them to go through the actual crash site, connecting the DNA to identify him, and to literally repatriate his remains back so he can have a burial at Arlington Cemetery that happened 3 weeks ago. So one out of those 66 guys has been given, again, a burial with honors and honor. My goal is to find those family members through this project, find those family members who want to start that process. I may not be alive when we get it the next guy dead, But that's really my why, my purpose for trying to get this project done. It's really not a documentary, it's not a movie, it's really a tool to help us do more research and activation for the families. So you won't see this on PBS or Netflix or anything. It's really just, again, a research tool for us to try and activate every resource we can for the families.
Somebody asked the question, who were the Tuskegee Airmen? And my immediate response was, well, they were just a bunch of good old red-blooded American boys who did what they had to do in the time they had to do it, and they did it well.
We were the biggest fighter squadron in the whole United States Air Force.
332nd Fighter Group, actually, who did bomber escort, which meant they put their life at jeopardy to make sure that the B-52 bombers got home safe.
It's important for the younger generation to know, first of all, the history of the past, but mainly that in order to overcome obstacles, you have to be excellent. The Tuskegee Airmen stands for excellence. We were people who were in college, we were leaders of our group, we were athletes, we were valedictorians.
Our project involves what we're calling now the Fallen 66. It has to do with those Tuskegee Airmen pilots that were killed. Families have not gotten closure. Those of us who don't know that they died need to understand it.
Widows who wanted to know the circumstances, because I've known some of the missions where some of the people were killed. They wanted to know the circumstances, and I told them what I knew. I saw the plane go down, saw it crash, but I didn't know exactly where, because they were trying to locate the remains and where they might have been buried.
Because they were very special men.
Samuel Gordon, lieutenant, was second lieutenant in the U.S. Army Air Corps, killed in action in 1945. He was a 20-year-old committed to serving his nation, committed to protecting his family, and was willing to sacrifice it all. And he did indeed sacrifice it all.
We're currently investigating the site that we believe to be the location of Captain Lawrence Dixon. The crash site was lost. His remains were never recovered after the war, but as the result of some research by the DPAA, this really appears to be that location. So we're now doing excavations in the hope that we can recover something that we can definitively link to Captain Dixon and thus kind of close the case on what happened to him.
Tell me, weary soldier, from the rude and stirring wars, was my